Welcome to Salem Witch Trials Daily for July 2nd, 1692. I'm Josh Hutchinson. Today, magistrates examined Ann Pudeator, Dorcas Hoar faced the grand jury, and Sarah Wilds was tried.
This is Sarah Jack. Today, Ann Pudeator was questioned by Salem's magistrates. She had been arrested May 12th, and this was at least her second court appearance. A magistrate said, "Goodwife Pudeator, you have formally been complained of. We now further inquire, and this maid charged you with bringing her the book at the last examination."
Sarah Churchill accused Ann Pudeator of bringing her the book at George Jacobs Sr.'s house. Ann said, "I never saw the woman before now."
As to the charge of bringing the devil's book, Ann said, "I never saw the devil's book, nor knew that he had one."
Lieutenant Jeremiah Neal of Salem said Ann Pudeator, quote, "had been an ill-carriaged woman, and since my wife has been sick of the smallpox, this woman has come to my house pretending kindness, and I was glad to see it." He allowed Ann to use the mortar used to prepare his wife's treatments.
Unfortunately, his wife's condition was worse after this. Due to the onset of diarrhea, Jeremiah said that when the officer came to arrest Ann, the nurse attending his wife told the officer that he had come too late. Jeremiah's wife grew worse until she died. Jeremiah had said that Ann Pudeator had often threatened his wife.
Elizabeth Hubbard said she had seen Ann Pudeator, but she had not hurt her. Sometimes Ann came with Rebecca Nurse.
A magistrate asked, "Goody Pudeator, what did you do with the ointments that you had in your house? So many of them."
Ann said she hadn't had any ointment or oil in her house since the death of her husband, except she kept some neat's foot oil, which is used in conditioning and preserving leather.
Constable Joseph Neal, Jeremiah's brother, said Ann had nearly 20 jars with ointment or grease in them. Ann said they were grease to make soap.
Sarah Bibber said she had never seen Ann Pudeator. Ann Putnam Jr. said she had never seen her except since the last time she came from the village to Salem town. Now this Ann fell into a fit, and Ann Pudeator was commanded to take her by the wrist, after which Ann Putnam Jr. was instantly well.
Mary Warren had 2 fits in succession and was cured each time by Ann grabbing her wrists.
Dorcas Hoar faced the grand jury today on charges of afflicting Elizabeth Hubbard and Mary Walcott. The witnesses for each offense were listed on the indictments as Elizabeth Hubbard, Mary Walcott, and Ann Putnam Jr.
Elizabeth Hubbard testified that Dorcas Hoar had tormented her most grievously on May 2nd when Dorcas was examined by magistrates. Elizabeth said, "If she did but look upon me, she would strike me down or almost choke me." Elizabeth also saw Dorcas afflict Mary Walcott, Abigail Williams, and Ann Putnam Jr. by biting, pinching, and almost choking them to death.
Ann Putnam Jr. was deposed against Dorcas Hoar, saying that late in April she saw a spectral woman who told Ann that her name was Hoar. But on May 2nd, when Dorcas was examined, she supposedly afflicted Ann as well as Mary Walcott, Elizabeth Hubbard, Sarah Bibber, and Abigail Williams. Notably, Susanna Sheldon's name is crossed out in both Elizabeth Hubbard and Ann Putnam Jr.'s lists of afflicted people.
Mary Walcott was deposed against Dorcas Hoar and said that she had been afflicted by the specter of Dorcas Hoar for a long time, but that specter supposedly did most grievously torment Mary during Dorcas's May 2nd examination. She also tormented Elizabeth Hubbard, Abigail Williams, and Putnam Jr., and this time Susanna Sheldon's name stayed on the list.
Sarah Bibber said that Dorcas Hoar most grievously tormented her a great many times with a variety of tortures. At Dorcas's May 2nd examination, she allegedly afflicted Mary Walcott, Elizabeth Hubbard, Abigail Williams, Ann Putnam Jr., and Susanna Sheldon by biting, pinching, and almost choking them.
After hearing this testimony, the grand jury returned both indictments, billa vera, for true bill.
And a trial jury was in court today to hear the evidence against Sarah Wilds, who had been arrested in April for allegedly afflicting Ann Putnam Jr., Mercy Lewis, Mary Walcott, and unnamed others.
Humphrey Clark claimed that a year ago he was asleep at about midnight when he was awakened by the bed shaking. He said that he saw a woman stand by the bedside, which when I well looked, seemed to me to be Goodwife Wilds, which jumped to the other corner of the house, and then I saw her no more.
Thomas Dorman testified that several years ago, Goody Wilds bought a hive of bees from him, and ever since then, Thomas had lost many of his animals. Fat geese pined away to nothing, and 6 years ago, quote, 6 brave cattle froze to death in January. In summer 1692, Thomas's wife traveled to Salem Village and met with Ann Putnam Jr., who told her that Sarah Wilds, quote, had worried away the cattle.
John Gold testified that 15 or 16 years ago, his sister, Mary Gold Reddington, told him that Sarah Wilds had tried to pull her off her horse 2 or 3 times. One attempt was made in a brook. Mary used all her strength to stay upright and managed to get out of the brook. But then, Sarah Wilds supposedly pulled her off her horse and pinned her to the ground until her brother-in-law, Abraham Reddington, arrived with Sergeant Edmund Town. This would have been her specter.
The language of this testimony makes it very unclear if they're meaning a physical Sarah Wilds pulling Mary Reddington off of her horse, or if they're talking about spectral Sarah Wilds. It's just not clear. They don't use any words like shape or apparition, so it makes it seem like the physical Sarah Wilds supposedly pulled Mary Gold Reddington physically off of a horse. And upon Mary Reddington's request, John Gold tried to write down what she could say about how Sarah Wilds had afflicted her. However, when he went to write it, Mary had fit so bad that she was unable to tell him anything.
When she was well, Mary told John that when Jonathan Wilds was ill at her house, he could go out at the chimney tops into the barn and he would put her hens in his breeches and kill them.
Mary gave some of the dead hens and even some living hens to Sarah Wilds. But Mary said that the living hens, quote, went moping about till they died, and so shall I.
John testified that with the last words he heard his sister say, she blamed Sarah Wilds for the condition she was in.
He also said that as he was retrieving hay for Sarah Wilds' nephew, Zacchaeus Perkins, the first load slipped off the cart twice, the second load slipped off. With some friends, he reloaded the cart and used 2 cart ropes to secure the hay, but the hay slipped out twice more.
Reverend John Hale of Beverly testified that about 15 or 16 years ago, Mary Herrick and her mother, Mary Reddington, came to him for counsel. Mary Reddington reported, quote, that she was assaulted by witchcraft, that Goody Wilds, her neighbor, bewitched her and afflicted her many times grievously. Do you think that this group of people had been blaming Sarah Wilds for this death for 15 years?
I think they had. I think they had a grudge against her because of Mary Reddington's allegations. But I think that Mary Reddington was suffering from her illness and not thinking clearly. Her story about Jonathan Wilds is so fantastical that he's going out chimney tops and into the barn and smothering chickens in his breeches. It's really hard to believe that that's based on anything at all real. Mary Reddington also told Reverend Hale that Sarah Wilds' stepson, John, told her he believed his stepmother was a witch. Sarah's stepson, Jonathan, had been tormented years earlier, so that some believed he was possessed by the devil, but Ipswich minister Thomas Corbett had thought that he was under obsession of the devil.
Elizabeth Simons reported that about 12 years ago, she and her mother, Grace Andrews, spoke with Sarah Wilds about the scythe that Grace's sons, John and Joseph Andrews, had borrowed from John Wilds Jr., and about their trouble getting home with their hay. When Sarah looked at Elizabeth, quote, fell into such a trembling condition that it was as if all of her joints did knock together.
Going to bed that night, she saw something between herself and the wall. So she asked her husband to let her sleep on the other side of the bed.
Can we switch spots? I'm just thinking about her asking her husband, like, you want to switch? No reason.
Do I switch? Yeah.
No reason.
Nothing to worry about. Nothing. So she asked her husband to let her sleep on the other side of the bed, and he let her do that. But when she got there, she felt something creeping up her foot and up to her chest. And then when it got to her chest, she could no longer move or speak a word. though she tried to call to her husband. Elizabeth remained in this condition until morning.
The next Thursday lecture day, Elizabeth was sitting in the meeting house when Sarah Wilds passed by. Elizabeth was taken with such a pain in her back that she was unable to bear it. She fell down in the seat and didn't know where she was. Some people carried her out of the meeting house, and she ended up at Mr. Hubbard's house, though she didn't know how she got there.
A crowd gathered when Elizabeth came to her senses, with Sarah Wilds taking position at the end of a table. Elizabeth's mother then asked her to help with something, but Elizabeth couldn't move. And ever since then, she had continued to have chronic pain that moved from one body part to another. She had been to see the doctors, but they'd been unable to give her anything effective.
Topsfield Constable Ephraim Wilds testified for his mother, Sarah Wilds, saying, "As for my mother, I never saw any harm by her upon any such account, neither in word nor action, as she is now accused, for she has always instructed me well in the Christian religion and the ways of God, ever since I was able to take instruction."
John Wilds testified that when he heard that Mary Reddington had complained of his wife Sarah, he had gone to Mary's husband John and told him he would have him arrested for defaming Sarah Wilds. Then John Wilds sent his brother-in-law to speak with Sarah Reddington, who said that she didn't know any harm that Sarah Wilds had done to her.
Ephraim Wilds testified again, saying that about 4 years ago, there was some likelihood that he would marry one of Grace Simon's daughters, but he had a hint that Goody Simons had formerly said she believed my mother had done her wrong. He and Mark Howe went to see Grace. She denied that she'd ever said she had any ground to think Sarah Wilds had done her any wrong, only what she'd heard Mary Reddington say. After that, Ephraim never returned to the Simmons home, and Grace Simmons was very angry with him.
After hearing all this testimony, the trial jury declared Sarah Wilds guilty of witchcraft. She would be hanged on July 19th.